if this Dream 9 situation had never actually happened, this whole
Wow.
story could have been a lot different.
Wow. Wow.
I definitely think so.
Probably would have been deported.
Yeah.
I do remember being like, I don't know if I would have quit because a lot of people, voluntarily sign because you're like, we're in here so long, let me just leave. I mean, I have all my ties here, so I don't know. There was people there were 5 years there, 4 years, five. I probably would have been inspired by their fight type thing. But
Hmm.
I do remember seeing on TV Obama, right? Obama being like, oh, felons, not families, and like the dreamer and comprehensive immigration reform. So you kind of saw that, but as far as like we need to get attention to get out, I don't think that ever like would have crossed my mind.
Did
Even
you
though
ever
inside I was organizing all the time.
did you ever consider just throwing in the towel? Was there ever a
No,
point where you were just self-defeated?
no,
Okay.
no.
Um, and is that, mainly due to your own just fighting personality in a sense, like that you never want to give in to anything of that
Yeah, I
nature?
think it's a little bit of all of that. And then also knowing like this is the only home I've known. Like I'm not going anywhere. Like this has to I have to fight all the way because, and I remember also saying it a couple times in there, like if I go home now or deport, I'm not gonna come back and like as a, quote unquote illegal or like without permission. Like I'm not gonna do that because look at everybody here who's here because they did that. So I remember being like, I'm gonna have to give this my whole fight all the way, so I have no regrets. And obviously, yes, some of my already like, I remember as a teacher at Maxwell Middle School, I fought a lot of injustices for the kids that were already criminalized and like they were called emotionally disabled. I was a teacher with them. I fought for them to have a classroom inside the building because we used to have portable buildings. And I'm like, of course the kids are going to act out. Look at how you treat them. They're like in the back of the school. Give us a building, give us a room inside. They will like want to be a part of like population. Like, so there was always me like this, like fighting and being like, voice for the voiceless. So I think obviously that transferred in, and also being a teacher, I would lead little like circles inside, right? And I was always just advocating. So I think some of that, and yeah, of course, being like no me voy a dejar, was for sure something that fueled me. And then seeing the Dream Nine, of course, that was a wrap. Seeing that they organized. I remember we were getting retaliated against a lot, and I knew when the hunger strike started. I remember we were at that point, I was in a, even though I wasn't green, I was in a pod where there was more khakis. And the khakis, because we have more, again, probably more history in the United States, we wanted to join the hunger strikes. A lot of the people in green, they're coming in and out. They're asking for asylum. They have 6 months here, probably going to leave. So there's not a lot of stake for them. So we were part of those people who were hunger striking. I remember being like, well, I'm in, because I was always fasting too. I was always like days without eating. Like it was really normal for me for my personal reflection, personal, spiritual, religious stuff. So I remember being like, we would huddle, and it was already something that was happening where people were being identified as being a part of the hunger strike. So they were getting punished or moved, stuff like that. Like, or we were getting denied. I remember one time I told my brother over the phone, I was like, they're not letting us go outside. They're not letting us eat food outside. They would literally bring our food and like watch us eat basically. And so I was always telling the girls like, I'm good. I'm a part of this, but don't gather with me because they're going to blame it on me. They're going to think I'm one of the leaders. And still the warden would come in, the chief of security would come in and be like, Pablos, and they'd pull me out. Be like, why are you doing this? And I'm like, what am I doing? What? Like, I'm just fasting. You've never wondered if I ate or not. There's been so many days where I didn't eat. Y'all never cared. Well, you know that you're doing this. It's for no reason, basically. Like the dreamers will get out, but you're not going to get out. And I'm like, well, maybe I deserve to be in here, but I'm going to fight with them, and I'm not going to answer any of your questions. Like, you're not my friend. I'm not on your team. And like this back and forth, which then I think started to cause them to listen to my calls. A lot of the calls with my brother or with other reporters would get cut, or they would come in later, the chief of security, the warden himself, and be like, oh, I heard your conversation, or I read the article you said this about. And I would just kind of be like, I'm not talking to y'all. And before then, because they were kind of nice to us, we kind of had some cordial relationship with them, especially because we were some of the few that knew English, right? But once this was happening, it was like, you're not my friends, don't talk to me, like I'm gonna keep doing what I'm doing. So yeah, I definitely think that the vigils outside. So then Chuyito got a reporter. What's her
I'm
name?
Chuyito.
Your
Aura.
Jesus. Aura.
Yeah.
Aura got Aura to not just talk to me over the phone, but she came to visit me in person. So, her writing those articles, right? Yeah, just all the things that were happening at the same time, I think maybe is what led them to give me an actual bond hearing. I don't know, really. I don't think Maribel would have gotten me one. But yeah, all of a sudden I had a bond hearing and got
And
a
this was
bond.
What
probably this was a couple of months after like Dream 9,
yeah.
uh, pro or stuff outside vigils. Within a month or two, she had a bond hearing.
All these circumstances just led to that. Did you do you recall how much of a bond had to be posted?
Yeah, 8,500, which I feel like we should figure out how to get it back. Did we ever get it back to you? That we did, right?
I don't
One of
know. I
them?
don't
Because
know.
I was on a double bond
Yeah.
because I ended up, because of my activism, going back to Eloy,
Yeah,
but
you went back the second.
8,500. It was like
So
8,500.
getting back to your personal relationship, and I'll ask you this, Jesus, like up until this point, you were kind of off doing your own thing, living your life. Um,
Finishing grads or
you know,
trying to finish undergrad and then grad
yeah.
school. Yeah.
Did you, what did this whole situation do to your relationship? Like, did it bring it together stronger? Like, how did it impact your personal
Yeah.
relationship with your sister?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the analogy or the image that comes to mind is kind of like a roller coaster. This was for sure one of those moments where we got closer. Um, she got out, and we actually started organizing together. We ended up going to DC together for over a month. My wife was here at the church doing a hunger strike in support to um, our efforts in DC. We went to DC, like longest running vigil outside of John Boehner's office. We went to John Boehner's house, got kicked out by Secret Service in his country club estate. All in effort because there was this small window, and I think it might have been 2013 on it. Of the Senate had just the Gang of Six, I think the Gang of Nine had
Gang
just
of Eight.
passed a
Yeah.
comprehensive Gang of Eight. I missed it. All right, it's somewhere in the middle.
No, you're
They
right.
had just
But you're
passed.
right on the year. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. They had just passed, and Obama had the presidency. The Senate had just passed narrowly the comprehensive immigration reform,
And
and
then Boehner let it die.
Banner did not bring it up for a vote. So we were outside of his office for probably a month and a half, 2 months straight,
And it was a part of the
praying.
larger national campaign to Fast for Families for immigration
Yep,
reform. So
yep.
there was people coming from across the nation. Our bus was
Faith
the
leaders.
AC to DC bus. We took a bunch of faith led orgs and directly impacted people. Jesus's nephew was with us. And that was the first time like organizing and like using storytelling. And I became one of like the organizers leading these groups and stayed back. Our bus came back to Arizona, but like other buses came in, and our core group was the one that stayed back to like help other families. And what we would do is like learn songs and faith songs to like sit in the offices until they made the right decision. While again, the group where Jesus was a part of, I was part of more like the people staying in, and Jesus was a part of like going to different places. And I think because Boehner's house was in Ohio. Were you in
In Ohio, yeah.
Ohio?
Yeah, we went to Ohio. We were there for a week outside in the snow right around Thanksgiving, 2013.
I mean, tactics
And
were
that's when we,
so like bold. They were like, we know he comes out of his house
yeah.
at 5 a.m. and they were there at 5 a.m. every morning.
There was one time we were at a church, and all this was like volunteer work. People were giving us their churches, sleeping in the pews, donating pupusas out in New York and DC. And there's a time when we were trying to organize, how do we put more pressure? I think the Senate was, or it was about to wrap up. And we had some lawyers with us that were traveling with us. And we said, what if we uh, don't let John Boehner's car like drive to Capitol and we just kind of block it off? There was like a bunch of just things thrown out in the university, what we can do. We need to apply for. There is such a narrow window. We have the votes. We know we have the votes. we were this tactic called bird dogging, where we'd meet people at the tunnel representatives and just say, "My name is Jesus. My sister's undocumented. We need your votes. I've been here for 30 years. I'm in the military. Talk about my military service. I graduated from USC." Anything. We were all just full force, full press corps. And, we said, "Hey, how about we just kneel in front of John Boehner's car, both in the back and the front?" And they're like, "Secret Service probably going to snipe you guys." Like, technically or legally,
Yeah.
that could be kidnapping or restricted movements. So
Yeah.
you'd probably be arrested if not killed. So we scratched that. We said, okay, let's go to his house. So I remember I was Patina and Reina. I think they're out in Phoenix, great people. And they went up to John Boehner's house. I don't know how they did not get, it was in a gated community. Don't know how they didn't get stopped by Secret Service, but his wife opened the door in a robe at 6 a.m. She's like, "What the hell's going on here? Please put it up for a vote, the immigration reform." And then they kicked us out and we had to leave. So it was full on press corps.
Have you followed John Boehner's situation in the last 5 years, by the way? No. He is now a huge proponent of marijuana legalization, which the irony, it's dripping with irony considering you were popped for paraphernalia. And this guy went from being this huge, anti-drug activist and, politician to now being a big marijuana proponent.
Good for him. We're all supposed to change.
Hey, he evolved. The other, I have on an aside, I went to when Obama was doing the introduction of DAPA, which is the DACA but for parents.
Was that in Las Vegas?
Vegas. Yeah. So I went to that, and across the street was one protester. There was a guy across from that high school, and he had a bunch of signs, and they were like, fire Obama, arrest or detain Hillary, a bunch of like, anti-Obama. But the funny thing is, at that time, I forget why, but a lot of Republicans were anti-Boehner because they saw him as being too towards the center on certain issues, which is ironic. And he had a sign that said "Fire Boehner." And as I was walking by, I was like, "Holy shit, I'm going to go join his protest." So I went and grabbed his sign, and this guy, I walked over across the street. I'm like, "Yo, man, can I have can I hold a sign too?" And he was like, "Sure." He had like 40 signs, and it was just one guy. He kept walking around with the, rotating them. So I grabbed the "Fire Boehner" sign. And I was like, "Fuck Boehner." And my buddy was taking photos. He was like, that was pretty funny moment. I got to join in an anti-Obama protest, an anti-immigrant protest. But anyway, so, moving forward in your case, you ended up, the case was it closed and then ended up getting reopened, the deportation case? Did it get reopened when you were arrested at that protest, Ale? I think that might have been the case.
In Virginia?
In Virginia, you were at
first it also was like, no, this was after Virginia, I think. So I think my case was, I think it was just I was in check-in. So when I was living in DC, I had permission from my ICE agent or deportation officer to live over there. I just had to check in like every 6 months or every time I went to court. And so,
were you living out there to be were you working with an organization, or what was your role?
I mean, it was not an immigrant rights organization or anything like that, but it was a reproductive justice organization, the National Latina Institute for Reproductive Health. I ended up getting a job there, and I was already in DC because I did a small temp job, like a 2-month job with a big campaign called Money Out of Politics. So I was already there, had quit like my job, and kind of was like, I'm going to DC. And I wanted to go to DC because that moment where my brother was mentioning when we were working in DC, it was beautiful to see the diaspora of Latinos and Black people and people speaking Spanish from the diaspora. And it was just so different because in Arizona, it's kind of like, oh, we assume everybody's Mexican, even though we're not. But, again, it's very just like black and white in a sense. And going to DC was like culture shock too. And so I remember being like, when I'm done with probation, I'm going to move to DC. I'm going to go learn from all the organizers and organizing and the campaigns, blah, blah, blah. So when my probation was done in 2016, I began to look for jobs. And one of the homies that was already an ally in the immigrant rights world, she let me know that they were looking for a logistics coordinator for this large, like, money out of politics. It was called Democracy Spring. And they wanted to march from Philly to DC to get money out of politics and like all these other things. So I got that job, but I also applied for an organizing position with the National Latina Institute. And while I was there, I got the job. So I ended up just staying. I remember like having to send my car over and like all these things. So I was working there, and at the National Latina Institute, being a reproductive justice org, I also understood that, oh, they're not really doing enough. It's not just about abortion and healthcare. It's actually like the criminalization of healthcare, criminalization of abortion. And I felt really adamant about like, they need to know who I am and know about me and like fight for me too. So I remember organizing like criminalization workshops with them. I started to make that a part of my work in Virginia, which included immigration enforcement. So kind of like force them to make immigration a broader conversation, which they always kind of did. They would fight for like little things around like, oh, all immigrants should get healthcare, things like that. But also because there were limitations, I co-started an organization called La Colectiva, which was like just like the collective fighting enforcement and trying to get detention out or ICE out of Virginia, Northern Virginia more particularly. So I co-founded that org, and we began to organize against ICE, and we led a protest outside of the Chesterfield County ICE processing center, who was also doing raids and doing a lot of like things clandestine, like under the ground, just kind of quietly, but really doing a lot of things that we saw in Arizona, like going inside people's houses and taking people. And well, unfortunately, I happened to be the loudest and the one with the megaphone and the one with the like more like political bullets against them. And I kind of shamed the cops. And I think that's really what did it. We were like, quit your job, and all this stuff. But we knew we had the right to be there. But what happened is that they, unless Chesterfield police was there, they had jurisdiction. So DHS cops were there, and they were the ones telling us to leave. And we're like, no, we could be here. Like, you should, you shouldn't be kicking us out. We have the right to be here, and blah, blah, blah. And I remember talking about Mumia Abdul Jabbar at that moment, kind of talking about political prisoners and all that. And as soon as the Chesterfield police got there, without them saying anything or warning, DHS just grabbed me. They like grabbed me, tried to grab me, but at first it was like a lot of like trying to get away from them, and the organizers and the activists there like huddling around me, and we were all just like in chaos though. But it was me who they were actually trying to grab. And I remember like they broke my nails, they pushed me to the ground, like my knees were bloody. But it was also because we knew we could be there. We didn't prep for an arrest. We thought this would be just a protest we had the right to be at. And people knew already.
How many people were with you?
It was like around 25, 30 people. And it was like 5 undercover agents. And that ended up coming out also out of their processing center. And then there was Chesterfield police, and there was DHS. It was like 2 DHS cops. And I just remember being like, I know people knew about my case, but also it wasn't like we planned it either, right? So I remember being like, what the fuck? Like, people like come with me, like get in between, but we weren't ready for that. We weren't prepared. And I just remember like, let me go. Like, I'm scared you're going to do something. I'm just trying to create chaos too. We didn't have no media either there, like, because it wasn't going to be a thing that where it was like, we wanted to get arrested. So just trying to get out of their grapples and stuff. And they ended up taking me to the back. And then they ended up like trying to figure out what to do with me and processing me or whatever. But it's a detention like processing center. So I'm like, oh my God, like, can't believe I'm here. Like, they're gonna fucking get me, and they're gonna
go again.
Yeah, like I was just like, they're gonna know who I am, you know? And they didn't really know yet. And then, but either way, somehow I get moved to like in Virginia, they have like a court magistrate. So they really didn't take, they took me to their processing center, like their jail.
What
But
were
you
you
go to
being
the,
charged with? Disorderly
I don't
or
remember.
something
I
like
think
that?
so. Something
Yeah,
like that.
disorderly
Or like
conduct or
trespassing. Maybe
oh,
trespassing
yeah,
because they
maybe.
said we were at the, whatever. And
It's
yeah,
always ironic that you're trespassing on what is basically taxpayer grounds. You know what
totally.
I
And they
mean?
were renting this property from someone. So it wasn't even them. Like it was like we need the owners of the property to tell us we need to leave. And we were also like not on the property. We were in the parking lot, things like that. But I did get put into, right, like let's say like the 29th Ave jail, like whatever local Chesterfield jail they had, but they had a magistrate too. But I remember being in there and just they were like mocking me and like taunting me because I'm an activist. So that was really bad. And I remember being like, oh my God, I do not want to fucking be here longer because they're already messing with me, you know? Long story short, it was a pretty long day there, but I go to the magistrate and they let me out on my own recognizance. But the cop who arrested me was also there because they have to take you and like, I don't know, whatever they have to do with you. And he was kissing my ass, like trying to be nice because he also kind of like already kind of knew a little bit more about me. We had been talking and he kind of was like, I'm a cop because they killed, like my dad was a cop or, trying to just humanize himself.
Was he
And
a person of color?
yes, he was a black man, DHS police officer. Because I kept being like, no, you could choose literally to do something else, dog. Like it
Yeah,
was just like a
exactly.
lot of like talking to him. So he felt really bad towards the end, And anyways, they ended up letting me out on my own recognizance. By that time, though, I already had been getting ready for something like this. Not to say that I wanted to get arrested, but I knew that I had to build a community. So I had a signal chat that was called Ale versus ICE. And every time I kept meeting people and organizing with different movements, I kept adding people and never really used it, kept adding people. But they had my phone and they activated that. That's how they actually got to my mom, maybe, or I'm not sure how they called my mom, but that was sucky because my mom was super scared. But it also activated this large signal group, and people were just like throwing down, getting ready to even for like a bond, stuff like that. Like my group locally, La Colectiva, was freaking out too because we weren't ready to support like directly impacted person, in this situation. Long story short, I get out and I'm organizing immediately. Next week, I had a conference in DC and I get a phone call and the phone says like 5 zeros. And I was like, what is this? And I just immediately knew it was ICE. And I pick it up and is my deportation officer, Red Wine, in Arizona. And he's like, hey, I just heard about what happened in Virginia. The Virginia ICE agents want to go pick you up at your house. But I'm telling them no, that you have a court coming up and that you're going to get reclassified. That I don't know if that was good or he was being good or what, but he kind of was like, no, like I told them to leave, to not go, that we're going to reclassify you when you're here, blah, blah, blah. So, so this is January. And like the beginning of January. So I was like, okay, I have to move back home. I have to organize back home, I have to build my base back home because I have this like more national kind of community and they might arrest me again. So like, I got to go figure out what the fuck I'm going to do. So pretty soon after that, I decided to move back. And what happened was that I started to go into sanctuary tactics. Like, okay, what does it look like to go into sanctuary? Because I'm not going to go back inside and like be mandatory again. Like it could be worse. I think it was close to, Trump administration, because I did go in March. I ended up getting arrested and it was under Trump. So I think I was very much ready to be like, what are we going to do? And like talk to my mom. I remember my mom being like, I don't have another 2 years to lose you or like more. And I was also like, I don't want to go back there. So we started to like look into sanctuary, Pastor Alice and just all of the UU churches. But I had to kind of like move back. And sure enough, we went to my court. And that same day, I don't know what happened at court. I don't think nothing really big happened at court. But that morning, my ICE agent was like, hey, tomorrow when you come in for your check-in, we are going to arrest you. I wasn't able to reclassify you. And by this time, my deportation defense organizers and my team, they were telling Jesse and them, like, you guys need to ask for a bond now and like do other things. I forget what it was. And Jesse was like, no, that doesn't really happen. And like, just kind of like, y'all lawyers kind of have to play their field. And, but my team was like, no, we need to do this. And long story short, I remember like literally that ended up happening, what they kind of were telling us to do, and like to ensure that we can ask for a bond now, because what happened is that I had to turn myself in and then wait to do all the processing for a bond. So that's why it was like another month and a half in there, versus what they wanted to do was like start that process sooner. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I have like pro bono lawyers that are like from the National Immigration Lawyers Guild, like Paromita. So they were all like working with Jesse and like overseeing what Jesse and them were doing, because we know very well, like they have to keep their relationships, with the judges and not really do too much. I remember Jesse apologizing to Jacinta from Mi Gente, being like, hey, like, sorry we didn't do that thing or whatever. Like, she is going to have to be in here longer than she is, and, blah, blah, blah. But when they emailed us and told us that, Jesse told me, it was like a moment. I don't know where you were at, brother. Were you there or you were just working? But Karen, his wife, my sister-in-law, and my mom, it was kind of like, okay, we're gonna turn ourselves in. Like, I'm gonna turn myself in. Like, Karen, can you go get me like a long sleeve and like these knee-high socks? Because all I can think about, I'm gonna be so cold when they take me again. And I need to be ready. Like, I need a sweater that doesn't have laces because they're going to take it away from me. I need shoes that are like slip-ins because they're going to take my shoes and it's going to be just awful to be right. Like, so Karen is like going to the store to get me my like turn myself in outfit, right? Get ready with me to go turn myself in type of shit. And so it was really tough, those 24 hours. And it was also documented, right? Like the organizing team was there. Everybody was there to literally go turn myself in. And it was wild. It's something I never would have thought I would have done. I know that I was very clear that I would never go back in there. And my mom and my sister-in-law walked me into those deportation officer's office and didn't know when I was going to come home, but I was only there for 43 days the second time under Trump, which was just way worse. A lot of different things.
Ultimately, your case was transferred to Tucson, and you had a final hearing, and the judge, Thomas O'Leary, ordered you deported. Mm-hmm. And that case is still up on appeal. Is that correct?
So yes.
Or what's the status?
He definitely ordered me deported. We appealed that immediately. We also thought we were going to ask for a governor's pardon, but that's something that's so far-fetched here that we'd never think we could ever do with Ducey, let alone with other things. But I'm in the Ninth Circuit still. But also during that moment, my case was reprimanded back to the district because of my derivative citizenship. They were like, we think she may have an argument, but then it was my burden of proof to prove that. And so that didn't really go anywhere, but it bought us time, right? Then that's when we applied for asylum and I got deported, and then we appealed that. But then there was I'm not sure how long or time it took, but I do remember that somehow we asked for my case to be administratively closed.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it was immediately after that or like if my case was in the Ninth Circuit and like we got it administratively closed, but that really helped. I was able to renew my legal resident card for a year, and then I had to do it again. I just actually got my resident card right now.
So they've been giving you like a stamp in your passport, basically, that renews it?
It wasn't a stamp. It wasn't a stamp in my passport, but they did give me this card. Like this, I forget
like
what
an I looks like. Or a little white card or something.
A little white card that kind of says that I'm a resident for a year or something like that. But I've been admin closure the whole time. So, and I just got, we've just renewed the LPR card. We renewed it. and it was denied by ICE, and they said, or by whoever does it, I forget,
USCIS.
USCIS, they said no, denied because she's deported, which was obviously wrong and erroneous. And that's when we went back to Grijalva, and
Because
Josie
it's still
helped me.
pending. It's not a
And
final order.
right, and but they said it was a final order. That's why they denied my LPR card renewal, and that's when we called Grijalva and Josie, and they helped us get it. And I just received it for 10 years. So that feels pretty
That's
good.
good.
Like an actual resident
Yeah.
card, not like another white like card. It's actually my green card.
An actual card. When Judge O'Leary ordered you deported, he said that it was deserved, that he felt did not, that your past haunted you, and in his opinion, you didn't qualify for asylum. And I just want to know, I guess, from both of you, first of all, from you, Ali, and then from you, Jesus, when we talk about someone who has had difficult circumstances in their life, and they have maybe made some mistakes that wound up in the criminal justice system, and then show remorse and show rehabilitation. I mean, what do you say to a system that doesn't encourage basically people to do that, because you continually get punished? And I guess would you say to that? Like, that we don't have a system that says, okay, 10 years ago you did something that would be considered criminal in nature, but now you've shown that you are somebody who has grown from that and learned and has shown remorse, and we don't give you that second chance. What do you think about that, Jesus, especially from a clinical perspective?
I think it's contrary to the human experience, right? The human
Mm-hmm.
experience is such that we all make mistakes. We all, in theory, should be able to learn, grow, and heal, and continue to develop into the people that we want to be, and something we're proud of. But I think it's like I said, completely contrary to the human experience, and I think that it is an intentional system, right? Created intentionally to make sure that we continue to cause this division and this division within our communities, right?
But can't humans, like this judge, utilize their discretion to buck the system and not have to comply with what the system's parameters, you know, make you do technically?
I, I mean, I would say yes. If not, why not just use AI? Why not just use the algorithm? Why not just use if a judge is unwilling to use that discretion and take all of the context in consideration when making a decision, then I don't think that there's a need for the judge, right? That's a black and white decision. If you made a mistake, you're found guilty, you need to get out, leave. Then what's the point of a judge? So I think that yes, it should be at their discretion, and I think that unfortunately, the lack of context and the lack of growth and seeing this from a 10-year, 20-year uh, period, I think it does a disservice to the communities.
And our laws, unfortunately, encourage this type of behavior because there are no statutes of limitations, especially when you're in the immigration world. Unlike in criminal world, when you reach a certain amount of time, you can gain back certain rights. But in immigration, it follows you forever. And it doesn't matter if you get your case set aside. Like, if you get a set aside, it doesn't matter. You still have a conviction for immigration purposes. It's really, it's quite eye opening when you start to see this. And I mean, I've had clients who had not even a conviction; they've had an arrest for drug trafficking, and it happened in the 1980s. And they are held to a standard called reason to believe, where they're no longer basically ever eligible to immigrate here
40 years later.
because of an allegation, reason to believe, not
Wow.
even a conviction.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that's in our law.
And I think it speaks a lot to like the culture of the system being a punishment system versus
Punitive. It's a punitive
rehabilitation system, right? Like that's why he was like, yeah, you're not rehabilitated. Like, okay, to what measurement, sir? Right. And I think there they did, count like my whole life in front, in front of them, and which was very unfortunate. Especially, it was very tough for me because my whole family was there. 2 community members were there. I think there was like a journalist there. We had a big community gathering outside, very spiritual, and like we spoke to the community. Like we wanted a win, right? We thought this would be a moment for some justice, but also we knew that we're fighting against a very unjust system, right? And so it was very important for that to happen. I think it did get my case, even more attention. I was able to really speak to the media more in a way of like, I'm not going to let this like hold me back. I'm going to continue to fight, right? We have a justice system that doesn't see humanity in us, while other people can just get a slap in the hand, right? And we continue to be vilified. We continue to be punished over and over again. So it just only really elevated my case or my story, and it made more people relate to my story and, really like release some shame in their own cases and in their own experiences.
I have a few more questions. Oh, go ahead, Jesus.
No, go ahead.
I'll ask you the last few questions. No, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, going back to the roller coaster analogy that I used earlier, I think that this was around the time when maybe our relationship took a bit of a lull, with her, her doing her organizing, working on her case. And I think there have been times when maybe she felt as if I wasn't as involved as I should have been, or as I was initially, right? I took a completely different route here. I started working on official like political campaigns. And then after the last campaign, I just was burnt out, completely like left the political field in that, and dedicated myself to my profession as a therapist. There was this one incident that I think will probably be a thing for us probably for a very long time. And that's when she was picked up, or she was taken to, she was rearrested, retaken by ICE, UCIS. And I was working with refugee kiddos, looking for asylum. And I was a assistant program director there, and I think my sister probably wasn't too happy with the work I was doing. Didn't believe in the work, and just her perspective as an outside. And she was arrested, apprehended, was then going to be taken to Eloy, I'm assuming Ale, and the van that picked her up stopped at our facility at where I worked to pick up a kid who just aged out and is now officially an adult. And
no, she was actually 9 years old. Her
she was
parents wanted
gonna
her back.
Yeah, she was gonna go back.
She had been there already for like 6 months, and she didn't get a home or whatever, and she was going back home.
Right. And my sister, she was by the twos, Core Civic, or the people that were transporting, and she said, "Holy shit! Like, this is where my brother fucking works. Like, this is the work my brother does. He is part of the system. He is part of the machine that contributes to the deportation of innocent people, of young people." And I remember having that conversation with her and feeling both attacked and maybe even like some shame around that, and just like terrible that this is how my sister sees me, right? And trying to justify my work, and hey, I'm a therapist, like I want to make sure these kids are receiving good services. And I think at that point she was probably very angry and very kind of like, what, eye-opening. And that was such a huge rift in our relationship at the time.
What year
for
was
years,
that?
probably.
That was in 2017.
17,
2018,
18.
Yeah.
Okay.
18 or yeah, 18.
I had
I
gotten the
see.
job probably a few months before. A few months before.
And
Yeah,
was that Southwest Key that you were at?
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I know there's a lot of controversy, of course, about that type of setting where you're holding children. But I also see it from the perspective of, you need to have good people on the inside who are there to provide services to these kids who have often come from very traumatic situations. That's
yeah.
tough.
So when I joined the organization, I mean, there was no, none of that in my. And maybe this is the human condition and how we tend to justify some of the worst. I showed up and I said, look, these are, 5-year-old kids up to 16, 17, 18-year-old kids. I'm there to love on them every single day. And hopefully the month, 3 weeks, a day, 2 days that they're there, they can feel some sort of like human connection, right? That's how I justified it. And then the whole controversy about a year and a half, 2 years after I started, came
Mhm.
out, and I'm like, oh, wait, how did I not see it like that? And then my sister, and wait,
What was the
yeah, like,
controversy specifically that came out? What was that?
so having kids, and I think a lot of it had to do with the family separation, the Trump policy.
Mhm.
We were receiving a lot of those kids, again, 5-year-old kids who their parents were taken to Eloy, other detention centers, and we were receiving those kiddos.
I see. So it was like you were part of this whole
Yeah, totally.
abhorrent policy.
And I can totally, totally understand that perspective. I think now looking back, and that was part of the reason why I actually did leave, was I can totally understand that perspective and that narrative. I think that being in there, seeing the kiddos every day, loving on them, that is not the perspective I carried. Not an excuse. That's just not the perspective I carried. All right.
And for me, like in my moment in my like organizing and activism too, and where I was at, like there was no room for like giving not even just Jesus, but anybody grace, right? Because it's like either you're fucking there or you're not. And like it was a moment where obviously now 5, 6 years later, I have evolved even more as an organizer, understanding that we got to meet people where they're at. It's a whole process of politicizing yourself, right? That we, in order, and we're gonna, in order for us to bring in more people, we don't want to push them away, right? So like obviously I've had a lot of learning as well too, but because I was in the middle of it, I'm like in the midst of it, like just feeling a lot of anger and also shame, right? Like I was passing through a place where my brother was the key holder and I'm the locked up one, right? And then picking up this little girl who broke my heart, and she was just like, she had no idea what was happening. I'm sure she also felt maybe just safe at that moment too. But I'm fighting with the driver, right? The G4 contractor, and just kind of being like, what do you mean you don't know you had a little girl that you're picking up? You don't even have no food for her? Like, you should get another fucking job. And I'm just fighting with him too. And like, and I'm just hoping my brother doesn't come out and I had to see him in my shackle or whatever. And just so much anger, that's also like influencing me at that time.
Mhm. All right. So let me ask you a couple of additional questions. So, um, you mentioned earlier, Alejandra, that you're working on a current like a project. I know there's been some documentaries made about your situation. One is Ale Libra, correct, and the other's
Libre.
Crimigration.
Mm-hmm.
And can you speak to where people could view those documentaries and then what your project is that you are working on?
Sure, absolutely. Both of them can be found on YouTube. Ale Libre is um, an independent film that actually also got picked up by the New Yorker, so you can also find it on the New Yorker. But it was just a very small capturing of my 1 year fighting for asylum, preparing myself for that asylum hearing that you mentioned, where I got deported at. And I worked with that with another a storyteller who had done a story on me my first time when I was in detention. She also did a podcast story with Latino USA, an NPR show.
Who is that?
Maya Cueva. Maya Cueva did an article, interviewed me while I was inside, interviewed a lot of my friends, the campaign, and it was called something like the most famous internet activist or something like that, because there was a lot of visual and aesthetics going on. That it was that second time, I think, actually, not the first time. And so I reached out to her again, and I was like, I would love to tell my story in a more like a visual way, you know. So we did Ale Libre, which again follows me fighting for asylum and just in my activism in DC and all of that. And then Crimmigration is a part of a larger mini series that Latino Justice does. Latino Justice is a national network of Latinx people uplifting the criminalization of brown people, Latinx people, and it's a series of different aspects of the criminal justice system, and you know, Crimmigration is just one of them. So you can hear a lot of different organizers, not just mine, but like from Arizona, Puente, people who fought Arpaio, and all of that. So they're both short films. I think Ale Libre is like 16 minutes, Crimmigration is like 7 minutes, but really beautiful stories. Again, people that I know made those films with me. And right now, for the last 5 years, I've actually been working with a creative writing team. Shout outs to Donkey Saddle. They are an organization that uses theater and art to do activism and political work. They've actually, I got to know them through some fundraising I did in DC for the National Black Mama Bailout work. I was a part of the local Maryland, DC work to bail Black mamas out, and we would do readings of a play from Palestine and what's happening in what's happening in Palestine with Israel. And it was a really beautiful, like, documentary style play. And we did readings. So I was one of the actors, and we would do readings in different places to raise funds to bail Black mamas out, but also put like a fellowship for them so they can also come and work and get politicized and get in the movement. So I remembered such an impact it had on me and the people with this kind of storytelling. Then I told her, I met the writer, and I was like, hey, like, I archived and wrote every single day inside of detention for 2 years. We should do something like this so people can know about immigration and like people can like activate themselves through my story. And they were like, absolutely. And we've been writing together, mostly archiving a lot of my diaries, but also a lot of interviews and just getting to know my family, my brother. But it's also been like the only way we've actually maybe had a little bit of processing and reflecting. I could say this podcast has been one too, because again, it's been home and just organizing, and obviously people going into their own lifing. But we're all like on our 5th year right now, and we're starting to develop more of the characters and what the play itself is. And right now, the play is also meant to become a toolkit for people to learn about immigration, but also uplift different people's campaigns, work with different communities and directly impacted people. We've done some readings and workshops, some of the scenes in New York with the NYU drama students. We've done a reading here in Tucson with my family. A lot of my family came the first time, not just my mom and my brother. People who visited me, right, who never also got to process this or talk about this. And we workshopped some scenes, which actually was really cool because we get to see a lot of Jesus's like experience and what he's sharing now. And I think it was really beautiful that people were like, you know, we talk about abolition a lot or talk about the system a lot, and it's always like cops. But a lot of our loved ones are also like learning and living life, and sometimes they're a part of these systems. So it was really beautiful to see like people like affirming also like that a lot of our loved ones are also like, you know, in the system. Sometimes it's not just police, you know. So we're still developing, you know, those pieces. But this time we actually just had another community event here in Tucson. My writing team came, we had a retreat, and we workshopped, because the play itself is like you're coming into a workshop. Of course, Ale would make you guys come into a workshop and a play, but we're giving an abolition and healing workshop. So the reason why I was able to really like how I was able to do a lot of this work was through somatics, like body trauma practices. And we're actually using one of our centering practices as a way to connect to abolition. And we just kind of help people like process and breathe. And the play itself is also like going back into flashbacks when I was detained, and now as the organizer and going back and, having conversations with my brother or my mom. We're still figuring it out. I mean, it's already been 5 years, and we foresee it being even longer, more years to come, because it's being developed with community and with organizers and with directly impacted people. So that's what we're doing right now. It's called Yo Te Esperaba. I can send you the link and just kind of like maybe to sign up for some email updates. But that's been a really
Can you
good way to
just
process.
can you talk a little bit about Yo Te Esperaba, why that was the chosen title?
Yeah. So immediately it was a story about my mom and my brother and me figuring out like what the system was like. And my mom used to write a lot of letters to me. She was such a poet. And I have so many of this. It's so beautiful. But she also always dedicated, even before detention, this song from Alejandra Guzman called Yo Te Esperaba. And it's a song of a mom speaking to her like pregnant belly and waiting for her child to come, waiting to hear her voice, waiting to hear what she looks like, or just loving on her. And just, I've been waiting for you. But then we juxtapose that with like the system's also been waiting for you. Like there's this unjust system that's also waiting to punish you, and that they've been waiting for you. And like there's even a scene where it's like, damn, my mom says in an interview, she goes, they've been wanting you since you were in my belly, which goes back to that part where they didn't let her back in anymore. So again, kind of like that family love, family learning about abolition, and not just abolition in the prison system, but abolishing the good and bad immigrant in us, abolishing the policing in each one of us. Right. So that's why also abolition is a part of the workshop as well.
You know, just turning to you, Jesus. So you're a certified clinical trauma specialist, and you say on your website the following: at the core of my practice, I am a human being wanting to walk and support other hurting human beings. Building a community and a safe bond with my clients is my priority. You also say the trauma that you have experienced is not your fault. You are not broken, damaged, or too dirty. You are trying to survive. The process of healing is possible today, and I am ready to begin this journey with you. Does the experience you've had with your sister over the past decade and longer, has that had an influence on your life's work as a clinical trauma specialist and social worker?
Yeah, absolutely. I think they're directly connected. It's just in a different setting. A lot of my clients are, undocumented, are mixed status, are parents of immigrant or children of immigrants. So the experience that I had growing up in the household, but also specifically the last decade and a half of going through this journey. If I may, though, earlier, like one of the earlier memories that I have of service is my mom getting all of our stuff that she had bought from the secondhand store, things that didn't fit us anymore, toys, and going south of the border to take it to an orphanage or Casa Hogar that's down there. So I think those type of memories of service, even living in poverty, but giving our last whatever, last $10, last here. There's a blanket for a new immigrant family that came. That taught me a very valuable lesson of being in the situations with people at their darkest moments. Um, and then, real firsthand experience of my sister and seeing just the brokenness, not just what the brokenness caused, not just to her life, but also our family. Seeing my mom terrified that she was just going to hand over her daughter to this cruel system that what had just taught, the system what had just taught us is that it doesn't care about you. And seeing how my mom needed support. I wasn't a therapist then, but how my mom needed support, how I needed support, how my wife, how Ali needed support, and how if there were more therapists that are willing to do that work in the dirtiest of dirtiest places, I think our communities can be a little bit better.
And do you, I mean, this is always kind of interesting thing to think about. When you look at your sister now, and I think this would be a good question for both of you to finish our discussion on. Um, my question for you is, what quality traits, or what one quality personality trait do you appreciate most from your sister, Jesus?
Oh my God, there's so many. I actually just sent her a text late last night, I think. Um, and I told her that she is the bravest person I know. She is the strongest woman I know. And my desire, among all the qualities she has, but specifically those qualities, is for my daughter to be raised as brave and as strong and as giving of herself like my sister. So I think her conviction, her ability to say, this is wrong, and I don't care what's gonna happen or the outcome. I'm gonna impact this situation for the better, and I'm willing to give literally of myself. That selflessness and the bravery that comes with it. Those are the two characteristics I think.
How about you, Ali? And we'll end on this point.
Ah, thank you. And this has been very therapeutic and healing. Mo, thanks. I think, and you asked about characteristics, right?
Yeah,
Um,
what personality trait or character trait does Jesus embody that you most appreciate?
I think for sure one of them is just how intentional and reflective he is. And it probably is because he's a Haas therapist and he's worked really hard to like build that capacity, or all that. But I think the way he just is very grounded in him and just who he is, but also in just who we all are and what we're going through, and just has so much like grace to give to people. And I think it goes back to him being super just intentional and reflective. I think he's also just the best dad we never had. um I think to himself probably, and I'm speaking for him right now, but like the dad he wished he would have had to, right? And the dad that he is now to his kids, and even the dad maybe even to my mom, that like she also missed, and just a great model for parenting for me right now. That I know parenting is in my future too. So I thank you for being such a great big brother, even though you're my little brother.
Well, this was a beautiful discussion. I'm glad that we were able to have it. I think you both are amazing in your own rights, and I'm grateful that you both joined me. And I think there's more to this story and journey that we may have to revisit sometime in the near future.
I would love
Um,
that.
so thank you both.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Mo.
Mo. Let us know when this comes out.
I will. Yep, I will
Okay.
let you guys know. And thank you to Emma Goldman, the
Yes,
producer. Look, doorbell rang right on time.
perfect.
All right, I'll stop this one.